When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the vehicle owner's manual for important feature limitations and information.
Podcast. How you doing, Ant?
Yeah, I'm doing all right, mate. Just back from Berlin last night, so I'm feeling a bit tired, but can't complain. There's not too much been going on.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm seeing some transfer rumours abroad. Like I'm seeing quite a lot of stuff happening in other leagues, but for the Premier League, it seems like it's been a bit quiet. I feel like it's the first couple of weeks of vacation, so no one's getting any deals done. Everyone's just kind of relaxing. I think it will start ramping up in the next few weeks, but yeah, it hasn't been a super busy week in the Premier League, has it?
Nah, it's been a lot of transfer rumor dragging on type stuff. I guess there's been a few kind of updates on transfers for our teams, but really mostly it's just been Chelsea selling players, hasn't it?
Yeah,
that's the only thing that's been getting confirmed frequently by Romano.
Exactly, it's just the opposite of what Chelsea are doing in January.
Exactly,
Everything was Chelsea in, and now it's Chelsea out. So yeah. It's the exact opposite.
We've had a couple, and I wanted to just address it because it's super funny. Like, it seems like our podcast, every single time we release an episode, like 1 or 2 days later, the thing we've talked about has been resolved. So we had the big chat around William Saliba, will he sign the contract, etc., and then boom, 2 or 3 days later, I think it was Ornstein or someone like that announces that he's basically pre-agreed a contract extension, and that's going to be all sorted in due course. And then last week we talked about Declan Rice and the emergence of Man City in that transfer race. And you said, I think your famous words were, just slap 100 million on the table and get it sorted. And it looks like you guys have slapped 100 million and got it sorted. So I know it hasn't been finalised. There's still chat around the payment structure, but I'm guessing you've got to be happy as Larry right now.
Yeah, I mean, like that. It's exactly what I was kind of calling for them to do, and I think Mr. Edu needs to get me on the phone, get me on the payroll, mate, as an external consultant. They can call me Agent Chang. I'm not that expensive, but yeah, they could. I think it's what we need to do. I'm still a little worried about these payment terms and stuff like that, because obviously that can always be a bit of a trip up to the whole deal. But the fact that other teams have kind of not pulled out, but they've maybe decelerated their interest in Rice as a result of some of the stuff we're hearing is a good thing, because obviously it leaves West Ham in a position where they've kind of got to just be like, all right, we've agreed a deal in principle, let's just get these payment terms wrapped up and let's move on. And I think the personal terms are already agreed with Rice, so it should be a quick finish from there. I think I'm not unhappy with the fee. I mean, again, we've had offline conversations maybe 2-3 months ago, and it's funny how quickly things change. But I was like, no chance we should pay 100 million. Like, let's pay 80 or whatever else. And now it's just kind of, because it's been dragging on, it's kind of like a Man United saga where you just pay and get on with it so we can move on to something else. Because there's plenty, I've seen a lot of other, rumors about Tchouaméni and whoever else. So if there's more business to be done, let's just get this wrapped up and move on, man. But how do you see it? Because I mean, I haven't heard too much on the Timber deal, right? Well, and obviously we need to get things going, man.
Yeah, I have to be honest, man. My reaction when I saw the Tchouaméni stuff, it was the same as it was just then. Like, no disrespect to you guys, but there's no way you get Tchouaméni.
No way. Oh, we could get Tchouaméni.
No way.
It's like you are getting Varane, mate.
No, he wanted to come to us, mate. We tapped him up when he was like 18, so we
exactly. Wenger probably knows Tchouaméni's dad and his uncles and all kinds of stuff, bro. That French connection out here. Come on.
Well, maybe, yeah. Like, I don't want to say never, because to be honest, I think we all like you've mentioned, like we didn't see Varane come in. We definitely didn't see Casemiro come in 2 years ago. I thought that was absolute rubbish. Didn't see Di Maria, if you want to go that far back. Didn't see Ozil, Alexis Sanchez to you guys back in the darker days of the back end of Wenger. Like we managed to get all of those deals done. So I guess it's not impossible. And they have just signed Bellingham. So
well, it looks like they're trying to shift someone, right? Because I've heard some rumors about Valverde as well. And
there's been rumors.
Again, getting rid of either of those would be absolutely insane because they're both ballers.
Nah, yeah, I think that's got to be rubbish. I'm just hoping that's breeze because, and I mean, you'd imagine the Valverde links with Liverpool, weren't they? And now they've signed Szoboszlai. I doubt they're gonna get him as well. Yeah,
it's a real step up, isn't it?
Exactly. What a drop.
But
that's a good convo for a bit later, I think, when we talk about one of our topics later on. But no, I agree with you in terms of Rice. I'm glad you've kind of just wrapped it up and it didn't become too much of a saga because I've heard some crazy shouts around this. I don't know if you heard Enialuko's shout about the potential reasons behind the Guardiola and the Man City bid for Rice and all this kind of stuff. And I normally rate her punditry's pretty good. And whenever I've seen her on TV, she's generally one of the only ones who speaks sense. But I thought that was just a mad shout. To be fair, I did hear her go on the radio and speak to Simon Jordan afterwards and kind of walk back some of the comments around it and kind of specify that she was talking about the women's game and it's obviously quite different in terms of the fees being touted around, which might make
at the end of the day, we don't know all the dark arts that go on, right? And I'm sure there are some dark arts. It kind of struck me maybe as something that is more of like a niche conspiracy type of idea that maybe mainstream media doesn't tend to really cover because obviously there's not a lot of salt in it. Like there's not a lot of
it's making
evidence
a huge
to show that it's going to happen.
It's a huge leap, isn't it? Because they're looking at Pep and Arteta, they're good friends. Maybe like it's going deep into that kind of relationship stuff, which we don't know. And you would assume City wouldn't be helping out Arsenal, considering you guys were the main rivals for the title last season. So yeah, anyway, that was interesting. But that's an example of kind of like the media is basically kind of almost now clutching at straws, to think of different ways to like talk about that transfer. It just needs to get done. So I hope you guys sort out the payment structure, get it all signed and sealed. I think he'll be a good midfielder for you. I think the fee's probably slightly over the top. I think it'll make him the British transfer record fee above Grealish, which is something. But yeah, you'd hope he's going to have a bit more of an instant impact than Grealish would, which I think he will, to be fair. And I think he fits the mould better of the kind of transfers that you're looking to do recently than maybe Grealish did for City. Because you've been looking at the younger kind of English within, the ages of like 21 to 24 kind of age bracket, someone who's got potential looking to step up. And those transfers have worked out really well for you. I'm thinking of Aaron Ramsdale, Ben White. So I think there's a track record there, and I think he'll fit in well. And I was looking, I don't know if you saw that. So I think Sky or one of the big broadcasters did a comparison chart with Rice, Partey, and a bunch of other Arsenal midfielders. And actually, his stats last season, on the face of those stats, it looked like, he was much more impactful in that DM position than Partey was. And everyone remember last year, all the chat.
Everyone was screaming about Partey being
best
like
DM
top
in the year
until the fall off at the end.
Yeah, so that's a good sign as well. So I'm glad for you guys. I think it's a good signing. I think it's better that he goes to you, to be honest, than City. City don't really need him, and it will just start to feel a bit like City stockpiling players if they got him, to be honest. And you need someone in that position. So
I want to touch on the whole 100 million thing, though, right? 100%, it's too much to be playing for that kind of player, and there's a lot of English tax added onto it, right? 100%. But at the end of the day, when we talk about these transfer fees and we talk about Grealish or we talk about like, Antony or we talk about whoever, these large transfers, Nunes, all of these kinds of ones, right? For the most part, right, when you're looking at this kind of money, the fees are going to go up every single year. So when we talk about, it's the English transfer record, I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of years later, there's something that's 20 million more than it, right? Like the inflation says like, the prices aren't going down. We just see them continuously going up and up and up and up and up. to the point where we're kind of looking to see when's the end of this going to happen, right? When are we going to start to see prices kind of level out? I don't think we're going to see that. They're just going to continuously go up. So I think for Rice, from my perspective, when people like City fans are saying, "Oh, you're paying 100, you're setting a transfer record," can we all, anybody that has spent more than 80 million on a player, can we all just shut up? Because we know it's going to happen again. Unless your team is in the mud and you've got no money anymore, it's going to happen again. And when we're talking about this too as well, we don't factor in, Haaland was 60 million, but they're paying him like 600 grand a week with all the bonuses and stuff like that. So can we at least like factor in the fact that it's not just about the transfer fee, especially if you think about the payment times and the fact that we're paying it over a certain amount of time. It's not like we're just dropping 105 million straight out. And then the fact that he's going to come in and he's not going to be on 400 grand a week or 700 grand a week like Haaland or whatever else. So when we're talking about transfer fees, I think we need to keep in mind everyone else has spent loads and loads of money. I know Arsenal are one of the big spenders, but everyone else in that top 6, top 7 has spent loads of money, like maybe Tottenham excluded. They've spent a bit, but not on the crazy levels of everyone else. So let's just bear that in mind. So when we like turn around and we point the finger and say, "Oh, Arsenal have spent so much money for somebody," a couple of years ago it was everyone pointing the finger at City. In a couple of years' time, it'll be everyone pointing the finger at maybe not Liverpool, but I don't know, United if you get new owners, or Newcastle or whoever else. It just seems like a game of like that's that Spider-Man meme where they're just like constantly pointing the finger at each other. You got 3 Spider-Man. It's going to happen to you again as well. So I mean, I feel like we should all just sit down and be humble, as Kendrick Lamar would say, and just wait it out before we start talking about 105 million, so much money. Shut up.
Well, I mean, the shoe's on the other foot now, but we all do it. And it's true. I just think it's all relative because he's a good player. He's in a position that you need.
Prem proven.
Prem proven, but he's overpriced. It's fine. Like I don't see the problem with that. Like, and we all banter each other because we know we are the king of overpaying. I talked about it on last week's pod and basically every week's pod, how we overpaid for even players that I like. Like we overpaid for Lissandro. We overpaid though. Like you're one of the first people to acknowledge how much we paid for Antony, and he hasn't lived up to it. We overpaid. We wildly overpaid. Like it happens sometimes. It's more about the need of the position that you have and how well the player fits into your system. So as much as we banter
and the market. Because if it was AC Milan buying someone, they're about to buy what? Ruben Loftus-Cheek for 25 million. He's bloody English. There's no English tax on that, is there? But it's all about the situation. English team buying an English player, you're going to get everything.
Ripped. But it's also like I've heard some West Ham fans talk about it. Like he really is their crown in their jewel. Like they haven't created a player. I had a homegrown player like this for ages. Like basically since that stream of really talented players that they had for, remember during the early 2000s, basically West Ham were just rolling them out like world-class players in their academy. They haven't had, a proper one like that for ages. So they're going to ask for more. It's going to be different than Chelsea, who are basically selling the whole kitchen sink and everyone's up for sale, or they just basically got so many players that they don't really care, how much they get for some players. Obviously, the fees that we paid for the players we had bought from them were high because they were clearly players that they valued. They just weren't able to get on a new contract or whatever. There was other politics going on. But for Loftus-Cheek, for Pulisic, for Ziyech, for Koulibaly, like they're unwanted, so they can get sold for whatever. They don't really care. But
they're just getting them off the books.
All these things play a part. But ultimately, I think the most important thing is, does he fit? Do you need someone in that position? Will he be good? Is he the right profile and the personality and all that stuff? And then let the club work out what price they're going to pay. But you will probably get banter. Like unless he comes in and he's unbelievable, even if he's decent, you will get 100 million for that, blah, blah, blah. Like, and you will probably end up wanting to go down the City route that they've done with Grealish when he starts playing well, talking about him like he's the second coming of our Lord and Saviour, when actually he's just been good.
I can't speak for other Arsenal fans, but at the end of the day, like, I think that I'm not going to do that. I think at the end of the day, I just want good players, right? Like, he doesn't have to live up to his fee, because 100 million to me is still like Cristiano Ronaldo numbers. Like, if I'm buying someone for 100 million, I expect them to be like flipping Ballon d'Or top 5.
Exactly, a DM can't.
He's never going to live up to that. I just, if our team improves because of him, and he's a solid part of the reason why, and maybe he brings up more of that leadership aspect. I know Zinchenko's trying to do it, but obviously he's getting bantered for that. So if Rice can bring in a more respectable leadership style as well, alongside of like, you know, Odegaard and whoever else, then I'm gonna be happy. I'm certainly not gonna be like, oh yeah, he's repaid the 100 million. And that's the thing that gets me rattled on like the Grealish thing, is that he can play well like at this level for 10 years and he still ain't paid off his fee. He needs to be at a level above what he's playing at right now to be justifying that. So let's just be real. He's never going to justify that fee until he does that. So let's stop trying to say, oh, you lot are all screaming about 100 million. Now look at him. Now look at what? He's getting hammered. He's getting lashed every day. He's probably in IB for right now, you know, popping bottles and drinking shit. So like, what are we talking about here? Like, let's just all settle down and realize that we're all overpaying for everything, right? But it's also, as a big club in the UK, you're getting ripped left, right.
But
center.
It's also, but with him, he's an attacker. So I feel it doesn't feel as unnatural to pay that amount for an attacker. But what you can do is ask for proper output from an attacker and say, look, how many goals and assists have you had? Like, it's all good playing well, but you have to contribute. You have to have tangible numbers to contribute towards repaying that huge fee. For a DM, it's always going to be harder because when you look at his stat sheet, nothing will ever automatically scream off the page.
It's going to be 100% eye test. It's going to be 100% eye test. There'll be system. How well is the team playing as a whole? Okay.
No, but there'll be stats that will prove that he's doing a phenomenal job. But those stats aren't eye catching. So it'll be It'll be ball recoveries. It will be pass completion. It will be, and then the numbers that your eye gets drawn to, like goals, assists, whatever, they'll be low because that's not his job. But as long as you guys and your fans can look at it and say, with the eye test, he's impacting the game. He's holding, you know, the holding the fort. He's doing everything you need. And when you look at those stats, the key metrics, he's excelling in those, and he's at the top end of the table, like we talked about with goalies when we had Lincoln on and stuff like that. Then that's all you guys need to worry about, and just ignore the breeze around the fee, because it's crazy fee. But whatever, that's what we're paying now. The price is going to keep going up. And they'll keep going up. Chelsea paid even more for Enzo. I don't see Enzo pulling up trees. They basically dropped him back too. So let's see. Let's wait and see, man. But I think he'll be a very good signing for you. And I think it's interesting because we haven't quite ever seen this level of a big marquee signing from Arsenal yet. Not in a good while.
I would say this is setting different levels to what we've ever done before. Like,
you're at the big boy table again. You're at the big boy table again now, and it's good. I like it. Like, Arsenal should be at the big boy table. There should be pressure on you guys to sign big players and win big things, rather than kind of playing the underdog or just being happy finishing second or whatever.
There's also a big thing to be said also for beating other teams out to players, right? Like, I always say this, right? Like, when like Barca were coming in and nicking all the Chelsea players, or you guys have previously done that to us a couple of times. Chelsea have done that to you a couple of times. That shows like different levels of source. When you can come in and be like, oh, United want you, yoink, you're mine now. Or, oh, Chelsea want you, come to Barca. Like, it's that come to Defo Records type of chat where it's just like, you can't say no to me. And that shows big club intention. That shows that there's a pull to our club that I've been missing for a long time, right? A lot of our best signings have not been like hyper competitive purchases, if that makes sense, right? Like, when we were going for Ozil, for example, he's probably one of the better signings I can remember. There weren't loads of other people and we were in some sort of bidding war and everyone was trying to get him. It was kind of just like one of those, oh, no one knew he was available. He just popped up at our club, right? A lot of our signings haven't been highly competitive, whereas this Rice one, I think, has been, I know there weren't like official bids from everyone put in, but there was clear interest from a lot of the big teams in the UK, in the Prem, that wanted him. And we managed to, at least touch wood, fingers crossed, manage to get to him and kind of beat everyone else out for him. So that, I think it's a big thing for me, at least, is that when I can see us beating out you guys, it means, wait, Arsenal actually might be back at the big boy table here.
No, I think you are 100%. It's confirmation. I think these signings, you've been out of the blocks quick. The fact that you could have 3 signings sorted and we're only in the beginning of July is amazing. And because they're actually signings that I think a lot of, not necessarily all the players, right? But the profile of players are the ones that you guys were probably calling for at the back end of last season. Someone to come in midfield.
They've been listening.
Defensive-minded players. a right-sided centre back who can also play right back and also DM with Timber. Okay, the Havertz one is a bit left field.
Yeah.
You weren't necessarily expecting him to come in and replace Xhaka or play in whatever role in midfield, but it could work out. It's one of those ones where it's high risk, high reward. He's going for it. I respect it. I don't necessarily agree with Havertz. I don't really rate him massively, but I don't think it's out of this realm that he could turn into a good player. Because
I just feel like they must have been watching just pure Bayer Leverkusen highlights when they started trying to scout him, because they clearly because at Chelsea he was like floating. He was never really settled in like what position he was playing. He was never, and whenever he was settled in a position, it was never the one that I think he wants to play in. And it was then, as a result, very difficult to judge him specifically off of that. And then obviously the whole Chelsea saga of everything going on. It's a really difficult club to look at someone in their team and be like, oh, he's good or bad based off of what he did there, because that was such a weird once in a lifetime type circumstance and such a weird team and all of the turnover of managers and stuff. I feel like it's been relatively difficult to judge him. If I do judge him though, off of the Chelsea times, he's been shocking. I don't want him.
Exactly,
get him in the holding.
This is what we said to with Lincoln on that episode a couple of weeks ago. Like, from the evidence we've got, he looks like he's trending down, and he's been poor. He's been poor. But if you take into consideration his potential and what he was at Leverkusen, and even how he's kind of performed for Germany, then I think you can't 100% rule him out. You can severely...
He's got something to prove, for sure.
You could be sceptical, for sure, and doubt him and call him a bum and whatever else that Twitter bans us for. But you can't say 100% with certainty that it's going to definitely be a flop. So you
because he's still quite young as well, right? Like if he was 30, you'd be like, all right, why are we doing this? Get rid of him now. But the fact that he's still got some time, you think maybe he can turn it around. But I agree with you. He definitely has work to do to change the perception of him in the Premier League, because it's not good.
And if you get 3 or 4 transfers done and one of them's a bit risky and the other 3 or 2 you're really happy with, that's not bad, man. I'm happy to go into a season like that. I think that's okay. But from one person, inadvertently talking about Havertz, so from one bum to someone who you consider as a bit of a bum, let's talk about
how you're twisting it now, man.
my beautiful team rocking the new kit and that. Our kind of only signing that we've kind of, it seems like, got over the line is Sir Mason Mount. What do you feel about that?
I love that the whole agenda is going to change now, isn't it? Because when I was dissing him, you weren't calling out like, oh no, he's actually a lot better than you think. He's really good. Everyone was like, yeah, he's a Chelsea through and through. He's a Chelsea boy, came up through the academy. He was overhyped for a long period of time, where everyone was like, he's the next coming of Frank Lampard and whatever else, right? He was decent for that time, but he never lived up to that hype. And then over the last year, I know that he's still been like pretty much Chelsea's player of the year consistently through that time, but the whole team has been shocking, and he hasn't been like carrying him on his back like you might expect from someone that is supposed to be the next coming of Frank Lampard. So I mean, I think it's a decent signing for you. I don't think he's shocking. He's not Fred, let's put it that way, right? He's not going to put in those kinds of clangers and he's not going to make your team significantly worse. But let's not scream like that he's improving your team. He's not. He's making your team, like, depending on who leaves and who stays, he's just adding to depth of your team at the current level that it's performing at. He's not significantly better than Bruno, or he's not better than Bruno at all. He's not significantly better than Eriksen. So what's the improvement here in my mind, right? Like, who do you think he's better than in your team that will make you a better team?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I hear you, though. There's been some shameless behaviour on social media from a lot of United fans talking about the signing. I think I would say there's also been people who rightly kind of question the signing as well. I think it's been kind of a tale of two extremes, really. You've got a lot of people changing their tune completely and a lot of people just, digging their heels in even more. And I kind of sit in this weird space where I haven't seen too many other United fans, where I'm a wait and see FC. I don't feel strongly against him or strongly for him. I can see how he improves our team, but I agree with you. I don't see a huge improvement made. I see that he probably is he's got attributes and a playing style that probably make him more suitable for Ten Hag's system than, let's say, Eriksen, who I think has the
Yeah, he
playmaking
runs.
ability.
He actually runs.
He has he has the playmaking ability. Eriksen has that playmaking ability. He doesn't have the legs. He doesn't have the engine. He's not good at closing or pressing people. We saw that in the FA Cup final, right?
Yeah.
2 goals that we concede. A better presser may have caused a bit more kind of had a bit more of an effect on Gundogan when he's having those shots, and at least making him have some questions to answer. Where I feel like Eriksen is just, I don't blame him. I just don't think that's ever part of his game. That's why when we have the convo a bit later about positional kind of comparisons between players, I feel like he's not really a deep line playmaker, and he's not really suited to playing that deep in midfield. And I think he actually should be more of a floating 10 with less defensive responsibilities, because he's just not really capable, I think. So I think Mount definitely improves on that position. It's not a huge improvement, though, because I don't think his playmaking skills are as good as Eriksen's, or he certainly hasn't proven that. I don't think he's terrible. I think he's got ability to do that. But Eriksen, like we all agree, despite his Tottenham past, he's a silky playmaker. He's got that eye for a pass.
To me, he's a luxury player. He's like the Ozil type player, where he's like he's really silky, passing the ball around, but don't expect anything from him when he's off the ball. He won't do anything.
And I think the introduction of, or the purchase of Mount is to be an upgrade in that position rather than player to player. Like
he's just better suited for the position. Yeah, exactly. I think you've been trying to put suited for that. You've been trying to put Eriksen into that position where he's just not. He's not that position. And yes, I appreciate that he will improve your team in that sense. I'm just saying I don't think it's going to be like a significant improvement to your team. And I think you do need, if you want to compete next year, which I think you do, and I think Erik Ten Hag wants to do. I don't know if he's going to significantly improve you in that regard.
I mean, for the last season, it's hard for anyone to really argue that he would be a huge upgrade, really. What I will say is, though, I think he obviously wasn't our first target. Originally was Frankie de Jong in that position. And I think that makes sense, because profile-wise, he's similar to Frankie de Jong. He's just not as good. Like Frankie de Jong has, I would say Frankie de Jong has a similar level playmaking skill to Eriksen, if not slightly better at this moment. Maybe not peak Eriksen.
Yeah.
This version of Eriksen, and he's got the engine to cover bare ground, and he's got some of the pressing skills that he's got more pressing skills even than Mount does. So I see the profile, and I see why we've gone to Mount rather than, obviously, Frankie doesn't want to come to United. That's clear. So we've gone for Mount. So I'm happy from that perspective. It seems to make sense that at least he's not, for example, done what we did last year, where we were going for Frankie the whole season, then ended up Casemiro, and everyone's like, what the hell?
You moved on quickly.
Those profiles don't make sense. But now it makes sense, because they've obviously gone, look, we still want that type of player, but we've now identified someone who's gettable, who wants to come, and has a lot of the same skill set and potentially to get to a good enough level to improve our team. So I'm agnostic towards it, man. I think all the shrewd signing stuff you sent me, the video of it, the clip and stuff, I think it's going a bit too overboard.
So very shrewd signing.
60 million for anyone, and we love Makola, right? We rate him. We love that podcast and everything like that. But like 60 million is a lot of money.
Shrewd. Yeah, that's not shrewd.
You can't say that's a shrewd signing. But I kind of understand to a certain extent where he might be better than people are, kind of expecting, and he might be a better signing for us. And in that case, it might end up being a signing where people run back some of their comments, maybe about him being useless and all this kind of stuff.
If we think about wait and see. Yeah, no, I agree with you. It is wait and see FC. I think though, if I'm forced to make an immediate judgment, if I look at the bright side, I don't want to be too harsh to Mount, right? He's got the right kind of attitude. He typically stays he's fit. He doesn't have a problem with availability. Generally speaking, I haven't seen him get too many injuries over the years. And if he does, they're not long term as far as I'm aware. So I think that's important for your team. On top of that, you add on the fact that he seems like a player that really is invested in his team. Like obviously Chelsea is a different story though, because he grew up through that academy. But to me, he seems like a player that's going to give his all for your team, which is great to have next to like Casemiro and Bruno. You've got 3 give it all FC type players, right? Like passion merchant type dons out here that are going to be really fighting hard for your team. If I look at the the flip side, though, aren't you a little worried that like size wise, your central midfield is going to be weird? Like you're going to have Bruno, who's an absolute beanpole. You're going to have Mount, he's like quite overpowered for his size in terms of like strength and that, but he's still a relatively small guy. Casemiro, of course, can clap people when he wants to, but he's not massively tall. Like set piece wise, aren't you a little worried that you're building like a pretty small team out here? You're building like under 6 foot FC.
I mean, in midfield, it's a bit of a worrying thing with those two positions. Obviously, Casemiro is quite.
No, he can clap people when he wants to.
Yeah, exactly. He's got good stature and he's good in the air, so I don't worry about his height too much from that perspective. But yeah, a little bit, because I do think our midfield got overrun last season. But I think I really need to see us in a few matches to see how that midfield functions and to see how it works properly to say kind of whether or not Mount's gonna improve that or not, because I do think you're right. I think in size wise his profile is similar to Eriksen, but he's way more tenacious and he's got a bit more, like you've said, that
he actually uses the size that he's got. Let's be honest,
he's
Eriksen
got a bit
looks like he's going away from challenges.
Exactly, he looks smaller. He looks smaller in a way that De Gea kind of is quite tall and big, but actually he looks smaller and
coat hanger vibes.
Exactly. So I think from a profile fit, he'll be okay, because I think as an English player goes, he's actually got a bit of a dog in him. Whether or not he's going to be to the level as the South American players we've got, probably not. But I think he'll fit decently in there. I think size-wise, I mean, if you combine it with Lissandro, then that's not the greatest size. But, you know, we've then got Varane, who you admitted on...
Varane's a beast, yeah.
Physically a lot stronger now than he maybe has looked previously. And you've got... Hopefully
Shaw looks tiny because he wears like baggy 3/4 length shorts.
But he's
all
quite
the time.
tall and he's
but
good
he's actually
in the air
like
as well.
6'1" or something, isn't he?
Yeah.
But I'm just a little worried because I mean, you look at like Antony as well, not tall. Rashford is decent size, but I'm trying to look through that team, and obviously I'm looking at it with my Jose Mourinho type glasses on. I'm thinking, who here is going to get
small?
Yeah, exactly. Who here is getting their head on the ball? And maybe that worries me a little bit, especially because when I've seen like Man City always had a kind of, well, not always, but they were always on that kind of ball playing, smaller-esque type player. And even they've started beefing up players, right? They've got Haaland, who's an absolute monster.
They've completely changed.
a monster. Yeah, they've completely changed away from that.
Their whole team
really
is like
small...
6'3".
Exactly.
Yeah,
so that's where I'm maybe a little worried. And that's something I worry about with Arsenal too. A lot of times I look at our players in general. Well, I used to look at our team and I used to think, oh my goodness, if we come up against Newcastle or against one of these teams that's just built for set pieces, we're going to get torn to shreds. Now we've kind of changed that a little bit because we've got like Gabriel and Saliba and, you know, some of these people are quite big. But maybe that's a little bit of if I was a United fan, maybe something I'd be a little worried about is that you don't seem to be building a lot of height or like stature, physicality in kind of defense onwards. You know what I mean?
We've got a few players, but I think our teams are, you're right. Our teams are probably quite similar in that way. I do think we've got. I think Ten Hag's trying to build a team which has similar characteristics in that our kind of midfield and forward players he's looking, I think, to try and have more technical ability, more pressing, and he's going for a different approach than, for example, City has. And I think Arteta's gone for the same approach as well, where if you look kind of in our defensive line, we've got some units. But if you go from beyond DM, because if you have Casemiro for United, I'm not worried about his size.
You're not too worried.
If you have Rice for Arsenal, you're not worried about his size. You're right. But then when you go to the forward positions, you have less size. But I think that's by design. We've just got to trust our managers and hope that works out, and that kind of approach comes back into prominence. Because you're right, City used to do that, and it worked for the most part. But Pep's clearly looked at his team and gone, I need big, massive brick houses, because basically everyone in their team is like 6'3" and above, strong, physical, good in the air. Like if you look at their team, they're like they're like from Space Jam, the All Stars.
Yeah, exactly. The Space Jam.
They're huge. They're just all massive. So it's going to be a test, man. But we'll see. I'm not bothered about this Mount signing. I'm going to wish him well. I think he's like you say, I'm looking at the positive sides, but I hear it. Like last season, he wasn't good. I do think people have overhyped him in previous years, but in previous years, he's had decent output and he's been one of Chelsea's best players. So you've just got to hope he recaptures that kind of form. And last year was his Rashford year, and he bounces back this year again, like Rashford did, and has a similar impact. And if he does, I'll be happy with that. And apparently, all this Chelsea talk, he obviously came through their academy, but apparently he was a United fan, or that's part of the reason why he's chosen United, because he was when he was younger. Which I know people always roll that out, right? I hear Liverpool fans always say, "Oh, Bellingham's a Liverpool fan. McAllister's a Liverpool fan."
Everyone
or
loves that.
Nine times out of 10, it's bollocks. So I'm probably playing into that, so I'm hoping that's what he's going to show, similar level of hunger. That's what I'm going at. He's going to have a bit of passion.
I don't even think he needs to be your fan. I think he's just one of those players. He's just one of those guys that he's going to give it his all. He's typical English. He's going to give it his all, don't matter who he's playing for. And I think that's important for you guys. Because I think, remember when he was like early in his career when he was on loan and stuff? He was giving it his all for who was it? Not
Derby.
Derby, right? Yeah, Derby. He was giving it his all. And he hated... who's Derby's main rival? Geographic rival?
It's got to be someone in the Midlands, like Coventry or something like that.
Yeah, no, he was giving it the big one to them as well, right? And I remember even to this day that the rival fans hate him because he was and he definitely wasn't a Derby fan growing up, right? And he still managed to do that and really buy into the club. So I think regardless of whether he's a United fan or not, he could be a Man City fan. I think he'd still give it his all for you lot. So I'm not too worried there. But I think that's a good place to kind of segue into kind of the tier list that we want to get into, and it all stems from an argument that me and you had a couple of days ago. Can't remember what it was when I was watching someone else's content on YouTube, and they were talking about Maddison and they were talking about Bruno.
It's a good signing for Spurs. I want to say that.
No, very good signing for Spurs. Good signing for Spurs for sure. It's definitely a position that they need, and he does look to be a very good player. But yeah, not the disrespect to Mount, but maybe the over respect, the too much respect that was given to Bruno, and they were talking about how Bruno was levels above Maddison. And I came to you and I said, there's no chance that there's levels in between them. They are around about the same level. You could certainly give it to Bruno, right? Based off of what he's done over the years. You could certainly give it to Bruno and say that he's a better player, but they're not massively far apart. And this is where maybe you disagreed with me a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're massively far apart, and I don't think there's levels, plural, between them. I think Maddison is a very good player, and I think in the last 18 months, especially, his stats show that he's been performing at the highest level he's ever performed. And I think a lot of people used to compare him with Grealish, and I was one of those people who probably leant slightly more towards Grealish when he was at Villa than Maddison. But I think off their last 18 months, I think Maddison's outperformed Jack Grealish. And again, not to get into a hate Jack Grealish pod again, but I mean, I think that's how high. I mean, it's about 7 now, but it's the highest. That's a really high, kind of plaudit I can give him. But I do think, and I get it, that I think Bruno gets on a lot because he's a little rat sometimes on the field, and he does little annoying things, and I understand that. He's the epitome of a player that if he's on your team, you love him. But if he's on someone else's team, you bloody hate him so much because he's such a pain in the backside. He's shouting at the ref all the time. He's doing all kinds of stupid stuff, and he's really complaining all the. I mean, even Jadon Sancho told him to shut the F up, stop moaning during a match. So you can tell, even as a teammate, he's probably a nightmare. But I do think his output has been, and I know there's a lot of chat around all the penalties and free kicks, but you still got to score them, you still got to take them, you still got to earn them. Obviously, there's been times where he's kind of fouled other people and got a penalty, which I acknowledge. Don't know what the ref's doing there. But his first 18 months in the Prem, I don't know if I've ever seen a player join the Prem from abroad and have that level of output. And the numbers were crazy. The numbers for that period were I think you could actually stand them up against some of the best AMs that have played it, or attacking midfielders that have played in the Premier League. And I mean like some of the creme de la creme. And I'm not putting Bruno up at that level because he hasn't been able to maintain it. But the fact that he's reached those heights, which are higher than what Maddison's reached even now in his biggest purple patch, make me think, come on. I know Bruno's dipped off a little bit. I know that that's kind of crossed over with Maddison's upturn in form. But I would say Bruno is definitely a level above. But I'm not saying that Maddison can't get there, because I do think at Spurs, he could go up a level. Imagine he's behind Harry Kane if he stays, or even if he's behind Son. Son will be loving life with Maddison in behind him. We know that's like if Vardy and Barnes and all those guys who are nowhere near what Son is as a player are going to be, eating off Maddison's chance creation. Son is too, and he could go up a level at Spurs. And I just think the comparison's funny because obviously a lot of rival fans hate Bruno. They're going to try and slander him. But, for example, another one of our friends called Sabozalai Bruno with tackling ability. And I was like, give it a break. You know what I mean? You're going to have to bleep that one out because I swore on you. But like that's an absolute bunch of shit. Like, I'll have he's not De Bruyne, because I know some Man U fans chuck him in the De Bruyne chat. And I know it's all based on this. He creates more chances than De Bruyne and blah, blah. And because that purple patch is so good. But De Bruyne has been doing it consistently for about 6-7 years. Bruno's done it for like a season and a half, like I said. And then his last 2 seasons haven't been the worst, but they haven't been the same heights. So I don't think he's in that combo. But I do think he gets slandered. So I do think we should play a little game and do a little tiering of it, because I think it will make it quite interesting to see how we kind of view all kind of attacking midfielders with a bit of creative ability, because I think there's going to be some interesting shouts, because they won't all just be Coutinho and Lingard that we put in washed. There'll be ones where we probably won't agree.
Yeah. No. So I mean, again, and so for the sake of this, for the viewers, we'll put a list on the right hand side just to show all of the players that we're pulling from and some of the tiers that we've got. So we've got a tier of world class, top tier, mid-table, and then washed, to keep it simple. So we've got 4 tiers, and obviously you'll see all of the players that we're pulling from. There's some difficult ones, like Ant was telling me offline. I mean, some of these players don't play as AMs now, but they have done in the past for a significant amount of their playing time in previous clubs and stuff like that. And they sometimes get kind of trotted out there in those positions too sometimes. So some of the names, they might not play AM all the time. They might not be a fully attacking midfielder, but for the most part, they can play there, and they have shown that they are competent in that position. So let's go through this first, right? So for world class, and who have you got in your world class list? Who's in that top tier for you?
All right. Since we're doing 4 tiers, this is gonna make it a little bit harder, but still, I'm gonna stick with only one player, and that's KDB. So I think when we think of world class and how we define a world class player, we've had this argument bare times. You would be, depending on your position, probably top 5 in the world in your position. And I think the only player in the Prem that can say that for this kind of position and actually have evidence to look at and prove is KDB. And I think when we include players like Bruno for his purple patch, or Odegaard for his purple, season that he's had recently, which I don't doubt that he'll continue to do really well, I don't think it's fair to put anyone else on that level. I think KDB is head and shoulders above them all.
Yeah, I mean, like KDB should have his own tier at the very top. I feel so. I guess maybe the way that I'm doing this, and just for clarity, I've got KDB, I've got Odegaard, and I've got Bernardo Silva in my world class list. And the reason I'm saying that is not off of their entire careers, because obviously Odegaard's had down times. Bernardo Silva hasn't always been a baller, etc., etc. But I think off of the last 12 to 18 months, you could pick them up, and I think almost every team in the world would play them. So I think Odegaard, outside of maybe like Real, I feel like you could pick him up and pretty much put him into any team today, and he'd at least fight really hard for that position, and it'd be really difficult not to pick him. So I think that's the reason why I've just put him in just over the last 12 to 18 months. If we are doing it over like the length of their careers, then of course KDB is in a category on his own. No one's done it at that level that consistently for that long. But off the last 12 to 18, I'm putting Odegaard and Bernardo in there, man. I'm sorry to say I'm gonna have to put them in there. It'll be interesting to see if Bernardo goes somewhere else, if he can keep up the levels and if he can be as important for the other teams as he's been for City. But at this point, just off the last 12 to 18 months, I'm putting him in there.
Yeah,
I don't see they're not too crazy, I don't think.
Nah, but I definitely want. Yeah, if you're doing it off the last 12 months, then I think it's just two. Then I think it's KDB and Odegaard because I think they've been clear of everyone else. But if we're doing just generally, I think it's Odegaard's not touching that level whatsoever because his best season this season hasn't even been statistically better than even Bruno's best period. So I get it though, because on the eye test he's looked really good. You guys have had a title charge off the back of it as well. So it's, for example, when Bruno had his best season, I think we finished second, but we were miles away. But his stats at that period were far and above what Odegaard's was. But I do think it's kind of looking a bit ahead, isn't it? Because we can see how Odegaard's been playing. We can see how Arsenal are trending.
Yeah,
it's not mad to
and he doesn't
predict
take
that
our
Arsenal are
pens.
going to can keep. Yeah, but that's this pen minus.
He doesn't
pens,
take our
add
pens
pens is
or
a
free
bunch
kicks,
of
mate.
rubbish.
We don't score
Bunch
any
of
free
rubbish.
kicks, and he's not Saka. He's not taking our pens, mate. So you can minus 10 goals off of Bruno's.
more than that probably. But still, I would definitely wouldn't do that. But the way the way we've gone with 4 tiers is going to make it real techie, and I think we probably won't end up having any arguments.
Well, all right. So
Because
top tier though, I think we might have a couple because I've got some shouts in here that I don't think you'll agree with. So who have you got in your top tier?
All right. So for top tier, I've got Bruno, Odegaard, Bernardo Silva, Bruno G, which I know might be one that people are a bit technical about, but it's definitely more of attacking kind of creative midfielder than anyone else Newcastle have. Phil Foden, and because of all of this situation, the cutting of tiers, James Maddison. But I'm not putting them at the same. They're not on the same. They're at the opposite ends of this tier.
Okay, interesting. All right, so we're not going to have too many arguments there. Actually, I think we might have some arguments down the bottom of the table because I had Bruno Fernandes, Bruno G, Maddison, and Foden in my top tier, and I don't want to be harsh to Foden, but I was considering and putting him a bit lower, if I'm honest with you, just because off of the last. I know he's won 5 Premier Leagues or whatever, and he's only bloody 24 or 23 or whatever it is. But he hasn't been like a fixture of that team, and obviously that doesn't mean that he's not really good because there's a lot of really good players that don't get in that team. But I was considering putting him a bit lower just because of the lack of impact that he's had for that team recently, and the fact that he's just not really getting on the pitch as much as he used to. I feel like he might be trending down, depending.
Yeah, there's a danger with Foden in that he's been part in and around this City squad for a long time, and people have always kind of raved about him.
Yeah,
but he's never been able to lock down a permanent position in that team, and he gets his goals and appearances in fits and spurts, and I don't know how sustainable that really is going forward. But I think we can't deny that he's got a really big ceiling, a really high ceiling, and there's potential for him to become a world beater, an actual genuinely world-class player for England and for City once that happens. But I mean, you also have to think about things because if you look back, and I'm not trying to associate him with that player in particular, but I remember when him and Greenwood were getting a lot of press because they were mucking about for England, and everyone was kind of hammering Greenwood, and that kind of came to fruition that maybe he deserved all that hammering. But I've always found like he gets himself involved in a lot of dramas off the pitch, and he seems to always kind of be all involved in that kind of stuff. So you never know. He might end up being one of those kind of not necessarily failed wonder kids because he's won how many Prems, but not quite live up to the potential he had. I think there's a serious danger around that. And I remember we used to have convos around Saka, Greenwood, and Foden, and Saka's standing head and shoulders above them at the moment. If I'm gonna compare the three right now, so I'm not mad at you considering dropping Foden. I think if we had one more tier, there would be a real shout for him as to whether or not he would be included in the top tier. But I think with these four, I think
you got mid-table then.
All right, mid-table. This is where we get the bulk of our players. So I've got Alexis McAllister, the world's cheapest and best transfer, according to some. Morgan Gibbs-White, who I think has been class for Nottingham Forest. Eze, again, class for Crystal Palace. Congrats to him as well. He just got his England cap. Christian Eriksen, Mason Mount, Emil Smith-Rowe, Havertz, Paqueta, Andreas Pereira, Buendia, Norgard, and Alcaraz. And Alcaraz, I think, probably is the most contentious from this group because he's only been at Southampton a short bit of time. But from what I saw of him, he looked really useful. And he had goals against he had goals against a bunch of teams, and he looked like someone with real potential. So that's my big chunky mid-tier. What's yours saying?
Yeah, so for my mid-table, I had very similar to you. So I had Eze, Mount, Gibbs-White, Havertz, McAllister, Andreas Pereira, Buendia, Norgard, Emil Smith-Rowe, Fabio Vieira, and Alcaraz. So very, very similar to you. Again, like I said before, and like we've talked about offline, some of them are trending up and some of them are trending down. So, people like Eze, Gibbs-White, even McAllister, I think those are players that are trending up. They're in good form. There's a chance. Give it a couple of years, maybe at better teams, they could be in a tier above. But obviously it requires consistency. I think for McAllister at Liverpool, he needs to be producing to really get into that next tier. Otherwise, he's going to go down into the wash category for me. Then I think in terms of trending down, like Havertz has been trending down at Chelsea. Pretty much anyone that plays for Chelsea has been trending down. So Mount, Havertz, they've all been trending down. Now that they're at better teams, I'd expect them to trend back up into that top tier at least. And then, you've got some players on there that have been injured for a while. Emil Smith-Rowe obviously is one of them. He's been trending down, but I'm hoping... I've got a similar worry with him and Fabio Vieira that given our midfield and the fact that we're building up and increasing our depth, I'm a little worried when they're actually going to get on the pitch to actually show that they're trending back up in another direction. So with those two, there's a chance that until they move to a different team, they're going to stay in that mid-table category or get down into the washed one, depending on how long they're at Arsenal and not playing for. So I don't know, maybe you disagree with some of those, but for the most part, I think that all of those players kind of sit in that mid-table kind of category for me.
Yeah, no, I see some of the thinking behind it. I think you're right. McAllister, I think it's really hard to judge because I think he's been good for Brighton. I think he obviously had a good World Cup. I think he is a player that is trending upwards. I think it's hard to see how high his ceiling is, though, and I don't know if his ceiling is high enough to get him into that upper category. But it's possible. He's going to be playing for a theoretically better team, with a manager who's going to push him. Yeah, no, because obviously Brighton did really well last season, didn't they? Like they did very similar to Liverpool. Obviously, Liverpool's
fans are going to hate us, man.
I couldn't give a shit, man. This is a Man Utd and Arsenal pod. They shouldn't be here. But no, like theoretically, he's obviously going to be with a manager who's proven himself a really top class manager, with a really with a team that should be pushing for doing a lot better than they did last year, certainly, and getting in the top 4 minimum. So he's got higher objectives. He should be playing with better players. He's probably going to be playing in a different kind of role, I would imagine. Klopp's going to be like playing him in a different role. So let's see. There's possibilities for me to run this shout back because I think there's definitely a chance that he can do really well and surprise me. But from what I've seen, I wouldn't actually think he is in that category with those players above, but he could get there. I think Gibbs-White, Eze, I think they're kind of probably going to be in this category going forward. Even if Eze had a really good back end to the season, Gibbs-White had a really good season, but it seems like the upper tier is for top 6 kind of level quality AMs and Premier League starring level, and I don't know if those guys have it in them. I think Ericsson was on the back end. He's going to be probably in this kind of category, if not trending down. I think the interesting,
I had him
really
in the washed category.
Yeah, of course you did. But the Mount, Smith Rowe, Havertz are the interesting ones. They're the really interesting ones for me because I think Mount's probably got the most. He's probably got the most credit. Like, it's not credibility, but he's got the most.
He's got the most Premier League proven.
He's got the most credit in the bank when it comes to his stats and his performances and the period of time. I think he's performed at a Premier League level for longer than Havertz and Smith Rowe. But I think potential-wise, I'd probably argue the other two have, what looks like more potential than Mount. So it will be a really interesting one. I think Smith Rowe, could get caught in the crossfires with what you said about the midfield signings you've made, and he could be sacrificed. I really hope he's not, and I really hope it's actually Fabio Vieira who gets sacked off, because I see a lot more in Smith Rowe than I do in Fabio Vieira, and that's very harsh, because Vieira's only been here for one season. But if I was going to sacrifice one, or I had to, I would definitely keep Smith Rowe, and I would get rid of Vieira. So
Vieira to me seems like a prime player for loaning out. Get him somewhere else, because he's still young enough. Loan him out somewhere else.
You may end up doing that, but because you're spending a lot of money, you might be looking to try and transfer someone and get some cash back. And if you do, it might end up just being a circumstance where you look at it and say Smith Rowe could probably get you 30 million from Aston Villa right now off the back of an injury hit season, and Vieira might not get you money back. You might only be able
I think that's an important point, though, is also the injuries, right? Because Emil Smith had a pretty significant injury that kept him out last season, and a lot of players don't come back from that, right? I don't just mean physically, but kind of mentally as well. They don't necessarily come back, and they're not able to play at the same level. So it'll be a big one. I'm just worried because of that. Coming off the back of that injury, he needs time to play. He needs to be able to play, to be able to get himself back in and get his eye back in, really. And I don't know if he's going to get that opportunity. That's why I'm a little worried about him. He's going to need to be top form every little cameo he makes next season. If he can get on the pitch, he's going to need to be playing out of his skin to try to prove that he really deserves to be in that team. And if he can't do that, which is really quite a reasonable thing, it's really difficult to come off the back of that, come into a team that's now supposed to be challenging for the Premier League based off of what we were doing when he was playing wasn't so much that. It's a really difficult thing to ask that from someone, to come in off the back of an injury into a significantly better team in terms of performance and actually really still shine. So I'm a little worried for his sake, but yeah, I mean, I'm praying that he'll come back around and he'll be really good for Arsenal, because he's one of the youngsters from our academy, right? So
yeah,
I definitely hope.
He looks good at the under-21s, though.
Yes,
the Euros under-21s, he's been playing really well for England. So I do hope that he performs well in the rest of the tournament. England win it, hopefully, or go really far. Yeah. And then he gets given a proper crack of the whip at Arsenal next season. But if I was an Arsenal fan, I'd be worrying he gets sacrificed, or he gets put under unfair kind of pressure to perform at a super high level. You know, not factoring in the fact he's been injured and he's only getting kind of garbage time minutes. But I think those three anyway are the ones that I think from this list have the most, the best chance to go up the next level. I think out of that list, I think the Paquetas, the Andreas Pereira.
Oh yeah, I had Paqueta in that table as well. I forgot about saying him. Yeah.
I don't know. I think Paqueta is quite similar to McAllister in some ways. I think they've got potential to get better. Do they have enough to go up the next level? I'm not sure. Norgard's kind of a steady Eddie, and he's done really well for Brentford, and they've kind of overperformed. But I think he's kind of going to be set in here. Alcaraz is one that I wouldn't be surprised if a Prem team bought him from Southampton now that they're down and took a bit of a punt. But at the same time, maybe playing in the Championship would be good for him. But I'm not too dissimilar. I would kick Vieira's arse out of there, and he's definitely in the tier below for me.
I can see that. I'm
not trying to be harsh, because I'm those people who was the FM Wonder Kids, love FM, and he was a player that I would often buy for different teams whenever I play the game. But just seeing him in the Prem, man, I'm just not convinced.
He just looks a bit underweight, if that makes
He's
sense.
just so lightweight. He looks He looks so lightweight, and he also doesn't look like he. I just, when you see players and you think, all right, if they pack on some muscle, which I think they can, I think that will change their game quite a lot. I can't see a world where Vieira's bigger than he is. And maybe I'm completely wrong.
Yeah.
But I just can't see a world where I just feel like he's always going to be that kind of size. He's always going to have that kind of strength. And he needs to go to a place where he can perform well being that size. So go to Spain, or maybe go back to Portugal, or even go to Italy potentially. And he would succeed, and he could actually be a really good player. But I just don't think the Prem is going to be the place for him. And I just can't see a world in which he succeeds. But he's so young, I could be completely wrong.
Well, that's the big thing about him is, like, again, I'm not trying to compare them, but I mean, Bruno's still massively undersized, but he doesn't seem it when he's on the pitch, if that makes sense. He doesn't play like he's a beanpole like he actually is. And I think maybe with Fabio Vieira, he just needs to get a bit of that grown man strength, because he's still a young lad.
Maybe. If
he can power up a little bit there and be maybe, I don't see him being like Terry Crews out here or anything like that, but I do think that he can maybe figure out how to wield himself a little bit better in the same way that kind of Bruno does it. And maybe I don't know if Arsenal's the right team for him to learn how to do that, if I'm honest with you. I think maybe this is, again, like I said, he's a prime loan candidate for me. Get him out to somebody maybe in the, like as you say, in the Spanish league, or back to Portugal, or maybe somewhere a little bit more physical. I'd love to see him in Germany or somewhere like that. Get him a bit of experience playing in a proper league, day in, day out, or week in, week out, and see if he can maybe cultivate some sort of strength that will allow him to come back into our team and be a bit more useful. Because at the moment, right, I mean, Odegaard's not a massive guy, but even he was like, Fabio Vieira was making Odegaard look like bloody Matic. So that's an issue,
that's
and
the
I
hope,
can see
isn't
him
it?
trending down. Yeah.
That's the hope is actually, I think I would ask him to look more at the Odegaard style, or that kind of player. I think that's what the best version of Vieira could look like. I get what you're saying about Bruno, but I think Odegaard is more of a technician, and the way he plays is more of a silky kind of technician, which I think Vieira's more in that mold, even though he's Portuguese or whatever. And I think Bruno has always been a kind of player who, don't get me wrong, he's not terrible technically, and he can see things and create a lot of chances, but he's a different type of attacking midfielder.
Yeah.
And I think Vieira's probably, I don't know if he could ever mold himself in that kind of role. I think the best version of him that he could imagine is probably having the output Odegaard's had, and settle into the Prem the way Odegaard has. And maybe that's why he's there, to try and shadow him. And hopefully, I mean, Odegaard's 23, 24?
4, I think.
So,
24,
yeah. So the hope may be that you just give him a bit of time, be patient, and let him have 2-3 years in the Prem.
Yeah.
Not so much pressure on him, and then he kind of explodes the way Odegaard has. So I mean, but that would be really patient. And football fans and football teams aren't patient.
They're not
these
very,
days. If you haven't started performing within the first 2 years, there's going to be calls for people to get you out of the club. So
yeah.
I have to be honest, getting to the last section of this tier, the washed,
Who've you got?
Rubbish man list. I've got Vieira. I've got Coutinho.
Yeah,
absolute rubbish. Can't believe he went for 130 odd million. I know he was very good before, but even then, like we've joked about how our clubs, or mostly my club, has ruined the transfer market for overpaying for players and setting this precedent. I looked at the list, right? Most expensive transfers in the world. We've got one on there, by the way. We've got Pogba. Obviously, context now, inflation, that would probably be, like wildly more than it was. But unbelievable what Barcelona have done. Well, as a result of what PSG did, we have to say PSG did the madness, because they went and bought Neymar for like 200, Mbappe for 160 or 170, and blew the whole thing up.
Yeah.
But Barcelona, at least those players are actually bloody top tier, world class superstars. Yeah. Barcelona went and spent 140 odd million on Coutinho, 130 odd million on Ousmane Dembele, and that's what's ruined it all. Because those players are good, but they're not anywhere near those levels. And what you've done is now set the expectation for all the players to be that expensive. So Coutinho is going to get extra boot from me, and I'd kick him lower if I could, because he's caused a lot of this
drama. Add on to that he's a former Liverpool player, and that will tell you all you need to know, fan.
No, that's just a coincidence. That's got nothing to do with it. But he's in there, and it's to show it's got nothing to do with Liverpool. Ex-United player Lingard's in there. Shocking decisions. To make the
try and act like Lingard's the way that you're not biased. You guys couldn't give a crap.
I'm not biased, mate. I love Jay Lings. What's his name? God. I love Jay Lings, but yeah, shocking decisions. He's made terrible decisions with his career. I don't know what he's been doing. For a player who I don't think anyone had massively high hopes for when he was at United, he kind of exploded. And then, there was unrealistic hype on him, and people were expecting him to do mad things, and he's never been capable. He's
also
I think,
the
of that.
Phantom youngster that everyone always thought he was young when he was actually accumulating years out here. Yeah.
So people, I saw a funny meme about that, and they were comparing players who you think didn't know would be the same age. Jesse Lingard's the same age as Casemiro. Take that in, right? So anyway, on that bombshell, he's in there because I don't know why he went to Nottingham Forest. He should have gone to West Ham. He'd be holding a European trophy right now, and he'd probably be, looking like he's got a good few years left of his career. Right now, he's in a crossroads. Dennis Pratt's in there. Not because he is a Pratt, but just because he's been bench warming for James Maddison, and that's hard because he's obviously been really good.
And as a team, got relegated as well, so it's not easy to put him anywhere else.
Yeah, exactly. He was never going to get a chance. And Brendan Aronson, I'd say probably Brendan Aronson and Vieira are the two controversial ones there, because I feel like it's slightly harsh. It's harsh, but I have to be harsh when we've only got 4 tiers. Like, I can't put them in there. They haven't done anything. Like, the good example I'd use is the youngsters I put in mid were Alcaraz. I think he's probably the only real youngster I put in there, and that makes sense for me because he was performing really well. I would have, if we had done a different category, Lavia would probably be in there as well, because when they did play, they performed really, really well, and they looked like they had really high promise. And I have to say, obviously Vieira I've talked about already. Aronson, bar the first 5 games where Jesse Marsh was getting him to play Ted Lasso ball, he was rubbish. He was either rubbish or was injured for the whole time. Yeah. And I think we may have got caught up in some FM hype, and he's just not what he's been cracked out to be. So yeah, he's in my washed. What are you saying with your washed one?
I mean, it's very similar. So I had Coutinho, Lingard, Pratt, and Aronson, but I also put Eriksen in there. And the reason that I'm saying that is just because he looks. I appreciate the story of coming back, but he looks like a shell of what he used to, and he's still probably better than everyone else in this washed category, and probably some people in the mid-table category too. But he just seems like such a shell of his former self. Like, his former self was in the top tier category. Like, he was alongside Bruno Fernandes, Bruno G, and he would be better than Maddison, and in my mind better than Foden at his peak. But he just seems like such a lightweight version of that. And even that at its peak, he was pretty lightweight to start with. So I've put him in the wash category. The reason why is also because the idea of being washed or being rubbish is that I don't think he's getting any better. I think he's defo on his way down now. And getting a move to United was crazy for his career, but it doesn't seem like he solidified a position in that team properly. So I just see it being downhill from here. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in Denmark League, the Danish League in 12 months' time, because to me it seems like he's on the outside of it, like he's on the twilight years of his career, and he's never going to be as good as he once was. Whereas I feel like a lot of the people in that mid-table category I've put in there, there's a bit more promise to them. That there's chances that they can become a little bit better than they are today. Whereas Eriksen, Coutinho, Lingard, they're all done now. Again, if I'm wrong, feel free to call it out. But, you know, in
Sipping on
12
that
months,
haterade.
no, if in 12 months' time, if Eriksen starts looking like prime flipping Iniesta or Coutinho and Lingard have turned it all around, you can call me out and I'll hold my hands up. But them lot are done, man. It's over for them.
Man's been sipping on that fine
Over.
haterade. It's just combine a current Man U player, an ex-Spurs player, and you should have guessed you would have been on that haterade. I hear you a little bit because at the back end of the season, he was infuriating me because it just looked like he was missing that little bit of oomph going forward that he had, and he was just as useless when it came to off the ball and you know, pressing and moving around the pitch. But I wouldn't put him in the wash category yet. But I think it wouldn't be. It's not like a crazy foresight to put him in there because next season with Mount, I don't think he'll be playing as much. And if he does play, there'll be expectation for him to come onto the pitch and create chances and make really strong cameos, which is a hard place to be in. But at the same time, that might be the right place for him to be in his career, to come off the bench and just create stuff and have a big impact. I will say, off the back of this season, though, in totality, I think is harsh because he's been our top assist creator, or he's at least one of the top two. I think he's been creating loads. If you think of before the injury fall off, I can remember him creating loads of goal-winning, I think Rashford goals in the main part, and he had a big impact on our team. So I think he's solidly in mid for me. But I think if we did this again next season, I wouldn't be absolutely astounded if he was put in washed because if he carries on his form from the back end of the season, coupled with Mount joining and maybe another midfielder or you know, a midfielder coming out of the blue like Kobe Mainu or something like that, you may not see Eriksen play too much next season. So it wouldn't be a crazy shout.
Remember, I'm also mystic out here. I've got my magic, my magic 8
that only applies to Arsenal transfers.
My magic 8 ball is telling
me
me Eriksen is going to be washed. You heard it here first. Eriksen's done. I feel so harsh as well because of what he's come back from all of this, and I love him. He is a really good player, despite being an ex Tottenham and current Man United player. But no, I feel like he needs to ride off into the sunset now, man.
This is so our tiers aren't crazy then. I mean the main I guess discrepancies are you've put Odegaard ahead because you're a home teamer. You put him on
Shut
class.
up.
For some reason you've put Bernardo up there, which I don't know. You're smoking on that budge. But then the rest is pretty similar. You've home teamed it again and put Vieira a level above he is.
What are you talking about? You put Fabio Vieira, the Don that's 21, into washed. What are you talking about, mate?
He's rubbish. You know he's rubbish.
Smoking budge out here.
You know he's rubbish. No, there's not too many controversial takes, to be honest. And the main thing that started the argument, we agree on. So
Maddison and Fernandes are in the same category. Thank you. My work here is done.
You're a charlatan. Because before this, for all the listeners and viewers, by the way, before we started this episode, we agreed on 5 tiers. And then he started it and he chopped one. And because he chopped one, Maddison and Bruno have to go in the same because I'm not going to be unreasonable.
Category. You put a phantom category in the middle of the top tier and mid-table. What are you talking about, mate? We should just call that tier Tottenham tier. All Tottenham players get their own middle tier.
It was valid because, and again, I'm not mad at it because you can't deny Maddison's had a really good 18 months because I think this season he's been unbelievable. On the back end of last season, he ended up getting crazy stats because he just had a really productive back end of the season. But so I won't be completely delusional and ignore that and put them on different levels because he's definitely not mid. He's definitely good to top tier for sure. But I think Bruno is at the upper echelon of that list, and I think that he's if Bruno can get back to playing and have a similar output as he did in the first 18 months, then I think he's not like a million miles away from being in that Phantom Odegaard group that you put above with KDB. And because also I think this position's at a bit of a transition because I don't think KDB is going to be as good as he has been next season. He's getting older. And I think they're going to start kind of, managing his
Phasing
minutes
him out,
even like
maybe?
they did. Not phasing him out, but managing his minutes a bit even more than they did this season. So I don't think he'll hit that crazy heights that he did before. And I think you'll see Odegaard get better and better. I think Bernardo won't even be in the league.
Yeah.
And then you've got Bruno G, Maddison. So it's kind of up to that tier that we've created. Or not you because you put Odegaard above, but those
Yeah.
players in those tier to like push up to be that next KDB. So it'll
Yeah.
be an interesting one because I think there is a fight. There is a fight because I think a lot of those players have a realistic claim to be in that player.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't
think
rule
we
out Maddison being in there. You know,
I mean, yeah, I mean he's 26, and it will really all depend on, because I think if you look at the world class category, you can never talk about world class if they're playing for a bad team. So it will all depend in my mind on how Tottenham do. If if they can be taken back to a decent level, and he's one of the shining lights for that team. Look at Kane, for example. If he's carrying that team, then there's a chance that he could get into that world-class category. But again, I think it's very much going to depend on how well Tottenham do. I think that Maddison's kind of proven himself to be a good player, and in this category, top-tier player. But in order to push on, you need to be playing for a better team. And if Tottenham look stinky next season, again, I don't think he's going to move up that tier. He might actually move down depending on what Tottenham do to him. Whereas I think Bruno G could get into that world-class category if Newcastle are lighting the world on fire and he's one of the main reasons why. He could get in there. If Foden gets more minutes and, if they're phasing KDB out a little bit in terms of minutes and stuff like that, and Foden can get a crack at it, maybe he can move up. Bruno Fernandes, I don't see him getting above the level that he once set. Again, take out the penalties. I don't know if he'll get to that level again, but yeah, I think we should do maybe a mid-season review, maybe around January time. Let's see how these players are still looking in terms of our shouts. Let's see if any of these players have moved up a little bit in our estimations by that point, because it'll be an interesting one. Like you say, Bernardo Silva's not going to be in there. Lingard's not going to be in there. I don't think. He probably playing in the Championship. There's some dons that won't be in there.
How do you go from Bernardo Silva and you skipped all the way down
I'm
to
just
Lingard,
looking through to see which players won't be there next season, isn't it? And I'm thinking,
No, but I agree with you. I agree with you on some of those points, though, because I do think Bruno, the way we're playing now and this Ten Hag system, I don't think he'll ever hit those numbers that he did before. I think before with Ollie, it was very heavily reliant on Bruno and his output and his creation and his penalties and his free kicks and his goals, because he was scoring a lot of, there were a lot of non-penalty goals as well that he was scoring.
No,
so
of course.
his output was really high and he had to be because of that system, but I don't think we'll play we don't play that way. That's why Bruno's stats have dropped as well, because we've relied on Ronaldo last season, or not last season, the season before last, ate up a bunch of his goals and assists. This past season, Ten Hag plays a different way. So you see Rashford scoring more goals, for example. He's in more of the positions. So I don't think Bruno Fernandes will ever get there. And if he does get anywhere close to that, it will be because he's been playing out of his skin. And I think that will be the only way that he'll get up there. But I think he's comfortably in this position where he is right now, at the top half of that. Yeah. The top end of that. And I think you're right. Bruno G is the joker in the pack. Because now that Newcastle have signed Tonali and he's going to sit back, I reckon that's going to give Bruno G and Joe Linton, or Joe Willock, or whoever's in midfield with them, a way more license to go forward. And I think you could see him have an absolute well-beaten season for Newcastle if they do well.
Yeah,
so I think that's going to be really
interesting.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a really, really interesting one, because I think he's the one to look out for, because I think, Odegaard, we know what he's going to do. I don't know if Odegaard will hit the same numbers as this year, but I think he'll have a similar impact for sure, because he's your key creator. And I think Foden, I'm gonna make the bold prediction. I don't know if it's that bold though, that he's gonna have another hit and miss season next season. And
really?
I think even if KDB's minutes drop, I think they'll find someone else to step in there, and it won't be Phil Foden. I think it's going to take a real turnaround in his mentality. And I think Pep's trusting him for him to do that, and I don't think Pep trusts him. And I think they're going to find some way else to to get those goals and assists. But yeah, no, this was interesting, man. It's a shame that you've managed to trick me into agreeing with you and done all your Arsenal bias. Typical Arsenal fan. What a scumbag!
I can't be level-headed all the time. I've got to be ridiculous every now and then.
We need to get another one of your Arsenal. We need to get another Arsenal mate on so I can actually have a good convo with an Arsenal type of one.
Shut up! We need to get less Man United fans. Just me talking into the camera. Get all the United fans off this podcast, mate.
But next week's going to be fun. Next week's going to be a really good episode. We're going to have another guest coming on, and we're going to be talking a little bit about, obviously, something that we haven't discussed on here so far, but that's kind of looming in the background with the potential Qatar takeover of Man United and kind of ethics and morals in football. Obviously, Saudi Arabia, we talked about last week. We can dig into that as well.
The lack thereof. Yeah.
It'll be a really good chat, and one that I think we often get kind of a very one-sided discussion around it from kind of the British football lens, condemning all of those places. So I think it'll be good to have a chat with our mate coming on. Yeah. So that'll be really good. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
Anyway, with all that in mind, again, thank you for listening. If you're out there watching us, we really appreciate it. If you're, listening on any of the audio platforms, whether that's Spotify, Apple Music, or anything else, please give us a follow and give us a 5-star review if you can. It will massively help us get up in awareness. If you're listening on or watching on any of the video platforms, whether that's YouTube or anything else, please do give us a subscribe, like, comment, share if you can. Again, how do you see it? Do you think we've missed anything out in that tiered list? Do you think any of the shouts maybe need to go down? Are you a big fan of Bruno F? Who knows? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you next week. Cheers, Ant.
Take care, man.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.